United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot and killed 1 year ago this week in Midtown, and now his alleged killer is back in a Manhattan courtroom. Luigi Mangione is in court this week for pretrial hearings connected to his state murder case. He also faces federal murder charges, which potentially carries the death penalty. He has pleaded not guilty to both the state and federal charges. Joining me now to talk about this and some other legal news happening is criminal defense attorney and former Manhattan prosecutor Jeremy Saland. Jeremy, great to see you. Let's just give our viewers a refresher, right? Can you clarify what's going on here? He's in court for the state case, but he has the federal case as well.
Yep. So he's in state court now dealing with suppression hearings. This is very routine. What we're dealing with is first, what he said is a Huntley hearing. Should that be permissible or should that be denied before a jury? Number two, whatever was recovered from his backpack, was that done lawfully? So that firearm, that 3D printed gun, that manifesto, should that be presented before a jury or should that be suppressed? So that's right now what the court is dealing with. And I understand there could be up to 20 witnesses to break this all down for the court to make that determination.
And what is the defense's argument in terms of what should or should not be allowed in court during this trial?
Absolutely. So in terms of the statement, we'll start there. They'll say some of the things that he said were a product of what we call a custodial interrogation. It doesn't mean he had to be in handcuffs. It doesn't mean he had to formally be arrested or that he was being questioned with the finger in his face saying, what happened and what did you do? But that he made certain statements in these types of conditions and there were not Miranda warnings given. That's number one. Number two, in terms of the property, was there probable cause to search? And was a search warrant required? Or was this something, meaning again, this manifesto and diary and the firearm in the backpack, was this something that was recovered by the officers because they were searching it to make sure that they were safe? It was in his reachable area. Is it something that they would have recovered in a lawful arrest and later on back at the precinct? These are the things that the court is going to vet through and listen to over the course of the next multiple days.
Even though New York, again, does not have the death penalty because he faces those federal charges that can carry the death penalty, how rare is it for us to be discussing this for an incident here in New York?
Yeah, I don't expect that even if there's a conviction in the federal case that he would receive the death penalty. New York is pretty strongly against it. But this is certainly an atypical situation. But a lot of people, including myself, have seen this in part as being more politically motivated in terms of the federal prosecution, in terms of getting in front of the media and making this a bigger issue, than it needs to be. And when I say that, it's a very serious issue to be handled by the case as a murder charge. But it's very atypical that you would see this both competing, prosecutions.
Anything else that you will be watching in the federal case? Any sort of, different ways that they need to try to prove both of these cases?
Well, it's if there's a conviction in the state case, it somewhat guarantees a conviction, and I use the term very liberally here. Expectation that there would be in the federal case, though there are not the exact same elements. There's different charges here. Either way, he has many issues before him, and it's an uphill battle for the defense on in both the federal court and the state court.
I want to get your thoughts on some other news, Jeremy. Reports out that the Justice Department is looking at presenting some new indictments against State Attorney General Letitia James and James Comey. So what might President Trump's Justice Department do differently now in a potential round two? What are you watching here?
Well, let's very briefly deal with Comey. Comey, I think they're out of the box because of the statute of limitations, and the case was dismissed. You can't supersede and fix something that should not have been there in the first place. And the issue is whether or not Halligan, who was the interim U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, was there lawfully in that position. James is a little different because what they can do, meaning the Department of Justice, they could theoretically appoint her as special prosecutor, although you would see that in a place where, for example, there was an actual real conflict with the Department of Justice. Do you really want to put that person back in that position? And then they'd be conceding there's a conflict. Alternatively, you could bring in other prosecutors to present that case to a grand jury and then proceed. So James has more issues before her, whereas Comey, I think, as a legal matter, is safe. But keep in mind, there are still issues that have not been resolved in terms of vindictive and selective prosecution that would rear back up again. And I would lastly say that if the Department of Justice, who has repeatedly said that we stand by our, Ms. Halligan and her appointment, if they really believe that, then why not go back with Halligan to represent in her current position? She can't. I think this is a real dangerous situation for the Department of Justice in that if a new grand jury does not return an indictment, this will be egg on the face of President Trump But again, should it even be there in the first place? The court says no.
And then finally, Jeremy, in our last couple of moments here, the Trump administration also fired 8 immigration judges here in the city, and it comes as the Department of Homeland Security saying that they are actively hiring deportation judges. What is the impact of these firings on the court system?
From a practical position, people dealing with amnesty, people are dealing with deportation in general. If you're backlogged 6 months, a year, you're just going to backlog this even more. So it seems somewhat inconsistent and hypocritical that you have the president saying we want to move these cases forward, and then you're removing judges. If you read between the line, I certainly haven't looked at the record of all of these judges, but it's likely that you would see that they are inconsistent with what the president wants to see happen. Whether that means the president perceives them as too lenient or not, I can't answer that, but that may be the issue. Likely very well is, but it's just going to delay things that the president claims he's trying to move things forward in a more efficient manner.
Jeremy, thank you.
My pleasure.